Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing any of our presenters quite yet. Why don't we go
Tina
ahead
just
and do
hopped.
that?
Tony
Oh,
Tina
sorry.
just joined.
As soon as I say that, of course. Um, and I might be putting Tina a little on the spot because she just joined. And I'm not sure if Peju is here yet, uh, her co-presenter. Well, I guess we can kind of get started. I think there might be two different sections of conversation, but Tina, you can correct us if we're wrong. Our first item for today was guidance for staff from the Office of Conflict Resolution in the Equal Opportunity and Title IX office. I know we have Tina Marasam, our director and Title IX coordinator here. So I might go ahead and just turn things over to you, Tina.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tony. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. And I see Peju is here. And I think we're going to start with Peju giving an overview of the services of the Office for Conflict Resolution.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. Thank you for the invitation. My name, as Tina shared, is Peju, and I am the director for the Office of Conflict Resolution here that works with all employees on campus. I'm going to share my screen with a short presentation that we have for everyone. How's everyone doing this morning first? It's good. I see thumbs up. Thank you. Great. It's wow. Love it. Love the energy. Great. So I am hoping that we can just share some information that will prove useful to our PNA colleagues. And I will jump in there. The Office for Conflict Resolution, I think everyone can see this and see it well. I'm seeing nods. Thank you, Natalie. So the Office for Conflict Resolution is a unit of the Office for Equity and Diversity on campus. It's a system-wide office as well, similar to the Office for Title IX, Equal Opportunity and Title IX that Tina had shared. And I have and one of the things, it being system wide, I'm going with my slides, so I'm not going ahead of myself here. All those campuses, Twin Cities, Duluth, Morris, Crookston, Rochester, and Extension, and all affiliated institutes as well. So we work with all campuses and work to support them in all ways. We also work who we serve. We are available to work with all employees who are non-labor, so who are not unionized employees. Of course, P&A, professional and administrative staff is in there, civil service, student workers, postdocs, faculty, tenured, all of those people are included in there. We are how unique we are. We are independent from the Office of Human Resources, the Office of General Counsel, Office of Compliance, the President's or Provost Office, and other university units. Our office is impartial as well. We don't advocate for one person over another. What we advocate is for a process that is rooted in respect and integrity. We're confidential, so we are a free resource to all of you when you think about things that might be coming up for you. We are a resource that you can tap in, connect with in an informal setting. And what informal means is that we don't document things, we don't keep records. We are mostly more important that might be useful for most people is that we're not an office of notice. We are an office that is just creatively working with you to think through some of the challenges that you might come up with. The name, the Office for Conflict Resolution, can sound big and ominous, but we really are coming alongside with people and working creatively to see how we can support you in a constructive and productive, healthy workplace. So that's one of the things that when we say we're confidential and we're informal, we are keeping to that. Next, what do we do and how really can we help? I alluded to that a little bit. Our informer services, when you reach out to us, the first thing that we start with is private consultations. That's one-on-one time with me or our assistant director. We're an office of two, so it's just the two of us. So we keep things with a tight lid. We have facilitated dialogues that can bring people to a joint conversation together. We have a circle process that's for groups in group processes there, and we also work. One of the things that we've been doing also is that we facilitate and we work with people in different ways. So we can come in and be facilitators of a conversation, vision planning. We also provide trainings and workshops as well. So something similar like this, we have something called our Conflict 101 workshop. So one of the things that we've also been dabbling into is also producing and providing guidance on de-escalation with another colleague of ours at the university. Historically, we used to conduct something called the formal petition process. So we do have that formal grievance process there. That might seem a little confusing when I just said that we're informal. What all you need to know about this is that we work with someone called the grievance process manager in the Office for Equity and Diversity, OED. So we work with them mostly in a technical capacity of time duration, because things that come up with grievances or formal petition, if someone does not feel that their needs have been met or exhausted, what remedy through an informal process, they are welcome to file a petition, but there are time restrictions there, mostly usually about 2 months or the like. I'll go through this again. So one thing that I wanted us to talk about what we do and how we support you is also, what is conflict? What do we think about conflict? We use a broad definition, and we just always say that conflict is what it is also what we say. It's neither good or bad. The difference is where we see two or more people that causes friction. That is our opening definition and working definition of conflict in general. Interests, perceptions, communications, lifestyles, lived experiences, beliefs, values sometimes do not match up with what someone in our workplace or in our other lives might be doing. And what are we thinking about that? Even as we might have tried our best to work it out, it may not actually do that. So one of the things we do is we work with people in a capacity to help them unpack what that means. The other thing is more on conflict. As I shared, it's neither good or bad. It just is. I often share with people, if I was the last person on this planet, I would be in conflict with the plant that was coming out of the concrete. Like it just is. I'm in conflict. I mean, how many of us find ourselves in conflict with ourselves often? So that's just thank you, Tony. It happens. So how much more are we going to be in conflict with someone else that we work with, or someone else that we live with, or different things? It's a lot more about goals, but it's also about care. That's it's people care a lot. I love this little image here of the little kids, even as little as they are, it's like one person's like, why do you have that plate? That's mine. And another person's like, no, it's mine. And we want to talk about, okay, what is going on here? How can we unpack that? How can we move forward from that? How can we get to a goal or a place that is optimal? What do you need to share? What do you need? What do you care about? Person A, little person B, what do you care about? And where can we overlap and make sure that it's constructive? One of the tools that we use as we're nearing closing here is respect. We work with people, and just that's what we always see. When there's a lack of respect, there's a lack of cooperation. Respect is sort of that glue, that massage, that oil that actually moves people along and shifts them into a cooperative stance. And we use that as a tool for working with conflict. From the minute you come, you work with us, we want you to feel respected. We want you to feel heard and understood. understood, acknowledged. That is important to us. We also want to hear your story, so we unpack that with you along the way, and we explore and brainstorm. We do all of this in different ways, either in our private consultations, in the facilitated dialogues, or in different processes that we find ourselves. My definition, our definition of respect is, it can be sort of this abstracting, oh, I don't feel respected. But what does that mean? This person is coming to my space without knocking on the door. There's so many things, but really when we come down to it, respect is an attitude or act of adequate consideration. Adequate consideration. It can be considerate, okay, I considered this, but you might feel flippant. Adequate consideration that manifests itself in a set of particular norms of which the expector desires from the expectee. So that gets a little academic-y, but really what it means is that how am I understanding what you need, and giving that and acting accordingly as well. So some of the things that we might break that down is that respect as a tool, as we address that, respect as modeling the behavior that we want to see, employing and displaying behavior that is constructive for moving things forward. In that way, respect as balance, stemming unnecessary or destructive behavior, biting your lip if you want to have an outburst, counting to 5 if you want to send a reactive email to someone who sent something that didn't feel particularly polite, hydrating, walking around, respect and shared experiences, highlighting the overlaps and the commonalities that exist between you and another person or a few people in there. So that's where we're coming in. I wanted to give you a taste of this a little bit. Some of you, we are going to be providing a little bit of this later this month at the pop-ups, one of the P&A pop-ups. So we're excited for that, but wanted to give you all a taste. I don't know if you have questions, but before we get to that, I do also want to also put it out there that our colleagues, your colleagues are saying that by the numbers, that 90%, 91%, over 90%, mostly in this, but 91% will recommend OCR, the Office for Conflict Resolution, to a colleague. I love it. BJ's on here. I love it. Thank you, BJ. You're so kind. But 91% would recommend OCR to a colleague. 94% will say that we give their attention, we give their concerns prompt attention. That's what we want, and that's what we're striving for. If it can be even 100%, we know that might be impossible, but these are all the things. We dipped a little bit, but 88% are satisfied with the services that we provide, and we work to do that and take that seriously. And lastly, 98% say that we're respectful. That's the theme and the vein in which we're working with and working through. Our last slide here is just our contact information, easily ocr@umn.edu, Office for Conflict Resolution. So thank you all for your attention. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I know we're going to shift it to our wonderful colleague Tina here, who also is a great supporter of our OCR work.
Thanks, Peju. Why don't I just give a quick overview, and I'll keep it short, and then we can kind of open up for questions that we can both address, if that works. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I wonder if you have to stop sharing first, Peju. Okay. Oops. Okay, excellent. Hopefully you all can see my slideshow here. My role is I'm the director of the Equal Opportunity and Title IX office. And just to give you a quick overview, we respond to concerns of sexual misconduct, of discrimination, of nepotism, and also of related retaliation. So sexual misconduct covers a range of behaviors, including sexual assault, stalking, relationship violence, and sexual harassment. The university prohibits discrimination based on a number of protected characteristics, including race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, and the other protected characteristics listed on the slide. So we address concerns based on all of those types of identities. And just want to note that the university's prohibition on discrimination also includes a prohibition on refusing or failing to provide reasonable accommodations that are needed to address barriers related to disability, religious beliefs and practices, and also pregnancy and related medical conditions. So that's our basic role. What do we do when we receive these types of concerns? So when we receive any type of concern, we're thinking about how to address it in kind of 3 buckets. The first bucket is, the person in front of us. What can we do to support them? Have they lost access, right? Do they have reduced access, or have they lost access to university programs and activities? What are they experiencing in their workplace or university activities? And how can we restore access, right? How can we restore a positive and inclusive workplace experience for that individual? So that's kind of bucket 1, is really focusing on the individual and what we can do to make sure that they, have a healthy work environment where they can access everything that they need to. The second bucket is more focused on the person who's engaging in the conduct of concern. How do we prevent it from happening again? And how, if necessary, what accountability measures do we put into place? And then the third bucket that sometimes comes into play is sometimes when we receive these concerns, they don't come out of nowhere. They come out maybe of a workplace that is where kind of this type of discrimination is seen as permissible, or isn't addressed appropriately, or is pervasive throughout the workplace. So that third bucket is there anything we need to do in the general workplace to reset expectations or norms? To make sure that it's communicated that there's not a tolerance for discrimination and sexual misconduct. So this slide kind of lists our tools that we use to accomplish those goals in all of those 3 buckets. The first is supportive measures, and that's really focused on addressing the person in front of us. Someone comes in and says, I feel like I have disability accommodations, and I feel like my supervisor is constantly making kind of comments about how my accommodations or how my medical condition is negatively impacting the workplace, or how it is a burden to provide these accommodations. And that is really creating a hostile environment for me. The first thing we want to do is talk to that person to say, what can we do to help support you in this situation, right? There's university resources for personal support. What else can we do? Sometimes, and these are a set of really flexible measures that we can brainstorm together. So sometimes this might be, if someone is having a conflict with or is experiencing bias or discrimination from a coworker. Sometimes it is, we're going to move your office. We're going to try to minimize contact between you and this coworker. We're going to remove you from a committee you'd like to be removed from where this behavior is happening. So supportive measures are really focused on the person who comes to us expressing concerns. Supportive measures are not typically used to kind of make workplace changes for the person who's engaging in the conduct, right? That comes at a later stage of the project, the process. So that's the first thing that we focus on. And then we explore with the individual whether the concerns would best be addressed through an informal process or a formal investigation process. And the core difference is that an informal process uses kind of a set of proactive, flexible strategies to try to stop the conduct and prevent it from occurring again. Informal processes don't involve a formal investigation. They don't involve kind of a formal finding of whether discrimination occurred, and they can't result in discipline. Those things, kind of the investigation, finding of whether the person is responsible for violating the policy, and potential discipline, are reserved for the formal investigation process. I can say I've been here for almost 15 years, and when I first came to Equal Opportunity in Title IX, we really only offered the formal investigation process. And what we found was the vast majority of folks who came to our office didn't want to use that process. Right? Their primary objective was to stop the conduct and kind of restore a healthy work environment. Formal investigations can be lengthy. We try our very best to make them kind of humane and compassionate experiences, but there's no doubt that they can be stressful. And many people didn't necessarily have an interest in discipline for the person in engaging in the conduct. Sometimes that's necessary, and for some people that's very important. But what we found was that many people who came to our office were looking for other strategies to stop the conduct. And so we developed a pretty robust informal problem-solving option that has resulted, frankly, in the way that it is now the way we address the vast majority of our cases. And the types of cases that we use for informal problem solving are one, cases where someone comes to us and shares concerns about behavior that is maybe sexual in nature and concerning. Someone's making sexual jokes in the workplace. They're not directed at any individual, but they're creating a kind of inappropriate, unprofessional, and uncomfortable environment for coworkers. These comments might not rise to the level of sexual harassment under the policy, but there's something we want to address early before it escalates. And we encourage folks to report those lower level concerns to us so we can step in. So those concerns wouldn't be appropriate for a formal investigation because they wouldn't necessarily rise to the level of a policy violation, but they're perfect for an informal process. We also have concerns that come to us where the person who brings the concerns says, I don't want a formal process and I won't participate. I just want you to do something to try to make this conduct stop. And so that's another kind of category of cases that we think is really well handled through the informal process, at least initially. If we get a report that discriminatory conduct is occurring, we have an obligation to address it. And if we try the informal process and it doesn't work, we can always, and sometimes we need to, kind of escalate the response strategy into a formal process. We also receive anonymous reports through YouReport or through the bias referral and response team. Anonymous reports are helpful. If there's, problematic behavior happening in a unit, it helps us to know about it, even if, folks are not ready or willing to share their names. We can often kind of go into the unit and ask some questions and get a sense of what is happening and try to address it. So those anonymous reports, we address all of them that come through our office. And those we also typically address through the informal problem-solving process, unless through our kind of inquiry, we kind of identify a complainant, right? We identify more specific conduct that we can address through an investigation. So what does informal problem solving look like? It's flexible, but in many cases, it looks like us doing kind of an inquiry, talking to the supervisor, talking to HR to understand are they aware of what is happening? What's the scope of the problem? Is it just this one concern that has come to us, or is it a broader problem that's also happening to other people that we need to know about as we're thinking about how to respond? It involves us typically coming up with recommendations for how the conduct should be addressed. Often it involves us making really detailed recommendations for the supervisor to address the conduct with the individual who's engaging in it, to be very specific about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in the workplace, to formalize those expectations and summarize that conversation in kind of a written document that we keep in our file. And, to make sure that the supervisor and HR are aware of these concerns and have a plan for monitoring to make sure that they don't recur. That is a kind of a typical outcome of an informal process, but they're pretty flexible. And we work really closely with the person who's bringing the concerns to us to understand what they would like to happen. There's sometimes when folks come to us and say, I don't want anyone to talk, I don't want the supervisor to talk to the person who's engaging in this conduct yet. It's low level. I'm going to try to say it's not okay. I just want this to be on record. I want to have a relationship with you so that I can come back, if my efforts don't work. And if it's low level conduct, that often is a good approach to start with. And then if that doesn't work, we can intervene at the next level. Formal investigation processes are kind of what they sound like. It's an investigation. We gather evidence, we interview people, we look at emails, text messages, sometimes security camera footage. They typically take a lot longer because we want to get it right. We want to gather the information. We want to go back to the parties and say, did we get it right? Do we understand this right? Is there anything else you want to share? And that takes time. So the outcome of the formal investigation process is a finding of whether discrimination or sexual misconduct or retaliation occurred under university policy, and if so, potential disciplinary action. While the formal investigation, is a longer process that, is more adversarial and, as a result can be more stressful, we try very hard to make it a compassionate process. We encourage folks to have an advisor or support person come with them in their interviews with EOT. Our staff are doing this work because they care about equity and diversity. They care about fairness. We try really hard to create an environment where people feel comfortable to share what happened and to provide all the information that they have. Folks can take breaks. Folks can, come back multiple times to tell us what happened. We try to use a lot of strategies to make sure our processes are trauma informed and, fair and humane. So that's just a brief overview of the strategies that we use. In terms of guidance for you all, we're available to consult. We have folks who come and share concerns with us without providing their names, who call us on the phone and don't share their name and just ask questions or, kind of provide hypothetical situations. We're happy to engage with folks in that way. We're happy to just meet with someone and answer questions, even if they're not ready to share information with us. We're available to consult with supervisors who may have a situation in their unit that they're looking for some guidance and support on. The one piece that is important is that we are not a confidential resource. There are times where we become aware of conduct that's occurring, serious discrimination or sexual misconduct. And when we become aware of it, we need to take steps to address it, right? That's our obligation. We can't let that conduct, go on at the university. I would say in the vast majority of cases, we can be flexible in how we respond and that we can follow the preferences of the individuals who come to us in terms of, the level of our response. But it is important to know that, we're not a confidential, resource like a counselor would be or the Aurora Center would be. And then finally, I have on the slide, and I can share these with Jacqueline and Tony, who can decide whether to share them out with you. There is reporting requirements. All employees who learn about possible sexual misconduct, as described in bullet 2, need to report that information to their campus Title IX office, so EOT on the Twin Cities campus, so that we can reach out to the impacted person and make sure that they know about all the resources that are available to them in case they would like to access them. There's also a discrimination reporting requirement for supervisors and human resources professionals. And then finally, I just listed, since this is so brief, we had a lot of resource documents. I listed and linked to them here. Our resource guides on sexual misconduct and discrimination go into a bit more depth on kind of how our processes work and what's available. We also have a resource guide for supervisors who have a discrimination, sexual misconduct, retaliation concern or issue occurring in their department. And then we have a newer guidance document for hosting compliant diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to make sure that our DEI efforts are consistent and compliant with kind of longstanding anti-discrimination and civil rights laws. All right. So that's all I have to share, but I think Peju and I are both open for any questions if you have them, and it looks like we have a few minutes, I think, left in our time slot.
Thank you so much, Tina. Yeah, we'll welcome any questions. Please raise your hand or put them in the chat. We have a few more minutes. I had a question that occurred to me during the presentation, which is, I think I'm hearing more from P&A staff about having potential conflicts with people in supervisory positions relative to them. So potential disagreements about the work, the amount of work, how things are moving forward. Is that the sort of conflict that folks should bring through you first, or is there another path because that's kind of an HR situation as well?
Thank you, Tony. I assume this is for me, or is it for Tina? It's
It's open to both of you.
um I will start. Sometimes people might think that we are HR, and I hesitate to say that we're HR adjacent. We're not. We're independent of. We're a different office, so we welcome those things. We explore opportunities to see if there's something that can be done and can be addressed. HR is a great resource, and we work with HR in any capacity that is available to us to be of support. But that is something that someone can bring to us, and we can talk it through. We can look at opportunities for joint facilitation to have perspectives sharing, perspectives taking, and see how to address that. One of the things that we also do, our new policy that is updated recently, is that if a supervisee is having some challenges, there might be a power imbalance there. Not always, but in most situations, there's a power imbalance there. Obviously, if someone wants to have a joint conversation with their supervisor in their capacity as a supervisor is required to engage in that, to be of support, to be of constructive willingness in that way. So I hope that touched on it. The simple answer is yes, come to us. We're not HR, we're confidential, and we're different in the ways that we can support and explore options.
Seeing any other questions? Thank you both so much for being with us here this morning. This is really helpful to, even for those of us who have heard similar presentations before, to get the reminder of where we should go and who we should talk to. We really appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you for sure. And I always say, anytime you have conflict, or not even just conflict, friction or tension of any sort, think of OCR and come. We'll welcome you and put our heads, two heads are better than one.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We are right about on schedule, and I believe our next presenter is here as well. So I will go ahead and verify. Our next presenter is going to be Catherine Dowd, the chair for Term Faculty and Academic Professionals Subcommittee, who's going to be discussing defining term faculty and academic professionals. And Catherine, I can turn things over to you if you're ready.
Thank you so much, Tony. And thanks for the invitation, everyone. Happy Friday. I've got a presentation on defining term faculty and academic professionals. I'm the chair of the subcommittee on which we call TFAPs. So if it's all right, I will share my screen here and get started. So I thought the best way to talk about this is just to start at the policy level, and please feel free to interrupt. And if I'm not paying attention to whether hands are raised, Tony, I appreciate you letting me know, or if there's comments in chat that you want me to kind of stop and answer along the way, I'm more than happy to do that. So when we're talking about term or contract faculty and academic professionals, here we're really, our committee has been very focused on instructional roles. So I wanted to start out just by talking about the overarching policy, which is the academic appointments with teaching functions. So this policy defines who can be an instructor in the classroom. So of course, that includes regular or tenure track faculty. What we'll be focusing on today are non-tenure track faculty or contract faculty. We also have a category of adjunct faculty. Then, of course, P&A instructors, we'll dive into that, and graduate teaching assistants. As defined in the policy, these are all eligible instructors who can teach 4 credit courses. So diving into the two categories that we'll focus on today are contract faculty and academic professionals, P&A employees in the education job family. So this is just a side-by-side comparison of those two, with a top view that term or contract faculty share the same job codes as tenure track faculty. So assistant, associate, full professor, same job codes. The governing document, which we'll talk quite a bit about today, is the Board of Regents policy on faculty tenure. Within the category of contract faculty, there can be types that are affixed as a E, R, C, or S to the contract faculty job code, but it does not have to be that way. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Within the P&A category for instructors are teaching specialists, senior teaching specialists, lecturer, senior lecturer. Those academic policies contained within the policy library, those policies are held by OHR. I just want to acknowledge that there are some overlaps between these two categories in other broad categories, such as research and clinical efforts. So, but I won't focus on that as much today. So P&As are researcher 5 through 7. Those include clinical research, as you probably know. Term faculty also can have research and clinical focus to their efforts. But I'll be talking mostly about the overlap between the teaching functions. Also, just to kind of set the stage here in terms of relative proportions, you can see that over time, this is from institutional data, that the number of tenure track faculty has slowly decreased since the 2012. So I'm looking at all across all campuses every fall since 2012, and this is through fall 2024. So a slight decrease over time in the number of tenure track faculty. You'll see that the number of contract faculty in contrast has increased dramatically. In this category, I'm not able to distinguish through this report in any case between those who have teaching, research, clinical. So sorry, I am able to distinguish. I'll break this down a little bit for you. So of this total number of contract faculty, 68% were full-time employees. Of those on the Twin Cities campus, this represents 89% of all of these are on the Twin Cities campus, with 80% in the health sciences, including vet med. So we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. That's a call out in the Board of Regents policy for clinical faculty for use of this contract faculty category for clinicians. The remainder are in the colleges and professional schools, such as the law school, Carlson School. And then P&A instructors, you can see, have slowly increased over time as well. In this case, we're defining teaching specialists and lecturers as having 50% or more instruction as their primary responsibility. Here you'll see that only 39% as of fall 24 were full-time P&A instructors. The remainder are part-time instructors. So 82% of this 1,200 or so are full-time employees, so 381. Of that, the majority are in CLA, and then the remainder spread across CHD, CSE, and Carlson School. Just to give you a sense of what is happening here is a number of P&A instructors are hired on a temporary or part-time basis to fill open instructional positions within departments, also to fill roles such as specialty programs, professional master's programs, for example, will often hire working professionals to teach an evening course for their master's program. So that's a common category used for P&A instructor or lecturer. Just to dive in a little bit more to the contractual details here so that we can have a sense of comparison, again, looking at P&A instructors versus contract faculty. So again, the teaching specialist, the definition of teaching specialist is typically someone holding a master's degree, and that of lecturer is a PhD or the degree equivalent to tenured faculty in the department of where the person is appointed. As you know, as P&A employees, we are typically annually renewed unless we have a temporary appointment as defined in an offer letter. The promotional pathway, teaching specialist to senior teaching specialist, lecturer to senior lecturer, is typically defined by the unit or by the college. And so that varies across the university. And just as an example, the Carlson School does not hire any lecturers, they only hire senior lecturers. So it's defined by the college itself. And that's something that is on the TFAP's radar because it is not defined in the job specifications in the OHR job code library. Another key detail, just to call this out, because you'll see the contrast for contract faculty, is that for as P&A employees, we are required, there's a notice of non-renewal that's required, and we are eligible for the non-renewal program, which is a severance payment. Contract faculty are made in accordance with something that's called the collegiate personnel plan. So that's something we'll talk about in a few minutes as well. There's currently a contract faculty template request, and we'll talk about why that is. This category includes what are called adjunct, visiting, and temporary faculty. I can talk more about that if anybody wants to. And as I mentioned before, a prefix can be used to designate the job code, the faculty job code, as being specific for teaching or research. So you might see something like a 9403 assistant professor T is how that's used, but it is not required that that be used. In terms of termination, as I mentioned before, this is a big difference between contract faculty and P&A employees. There is a period of non-renewal based on years of service that's required, similar to P&A. Contract faculty, however, are not eligible for the non-renewal program or the severance payment. There's been recent examination of contract faculty and their processes for appointment and how they serve the university. This is a result of a Faculty Senate resolution passed 3 years ago that came from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, or AF&T, that required that there be a strict adherence to the Board of Regents policy in order that contract faculty be appointed correctly and reported. So we'll talk about how that happens in both cases. So we'll talk about what that Board of Regents policy says, and also what's the mechanism for reporting. So there's two sections of the Board of Regents policy on contract faculty. The section 3.3 says that these are term appointments, true term appointments, meaning that within the offer letter, a specific date of the end of the contract is required. So that's in contrast to how P&A employees are appointed on continuous appointments, meaning that there's no end date specified for most P&A employees, unless a P&A employee is hired as a temporary employee. In that case, the end date is included. So for contract faculty, every contract faculty is a term limited appointment. So there's no right to renewal unless a decision is made on that specifically to renew someone, rather than, in contrast again to P&A employees who are assumed to have a continuous appointment unless they receive a notice of non-renewal. And there is a requirement for renewal on an annual basis after the 7th year. So after the period of time in which a tenure track faculty member would have received tenure. In contrast, the contract faculty member now has to have justification for every additional year beyond 7. How this is enforced is also related to what I will talk about in a couple of slides. So the Board of Regents policy also specifies when a term or contract faculty can be used. So that's section 3.4. You'll see the top bullet point that says someone who is principally engaged or supporting clinical activities. So that is a specific call out in this section of the policy. So you saw that reflected in the numbers that I showed at the beginning, that by far the majority of appointments, contract appointments, are clinical in nature. These other bullet points refer to the adjunct category, so subject to joint control of the university and another institution, meaning that someone has a tenured appointment somewhere else at another institution, but is appointed to carry out a specific function here at the university. Same for the next bullet point. The bullet point about funding for a limited time is also the way in which many contract faculty who are not clinical have been appointed. So they've been appointed as contract faculty with their primary function as research, or with, for example, on a grant-funded project that has a limited amount of funding, or a grant that lasts for 5 years. A contract faculty position ends at that end of 5 years. Yeah, similar for the next appointment, the next bullet point, experimental or restricted in nature. So those are the specific terms that are called out in the Board of Regents policy. How those have been applied is now being closely scrutinized. And the way that they are scrutinized and accounted for is something called the academic personnel plan. So the purpose of that is to enforce that first top level policy that we talked about, that only instructors with the appropriate credentials can teach our students. And then there's this appropriate balance, meaning that there is a balance between the number of tenure system faculty and others who are teaching, and there's specific limits in the policy that we can talk about further if you'd like. And then these are personnel plans are required to be submitted by college every 5 years. And we'll talk about what's in that report as well. So this is the information that's requested. The last time this was requested of colleges by the provost's office was 2023. So again, it is looking at who has academic responsibilities for teaching, whether they have appropriate credentials per the policy, guidelines for appointment of the non-tenure system faculty. You can see that there's a threshold of 25% if it happens that a combination of contract faculty and P&A instructors exceeds 25%, the unit has to justify why that's the case. And for example, that may be in a very service heavy unit. For example, I'm the administrator for the School of Math. Math is a heavily service oriented unit. So we will have to justify why 30% of our instructors in the department are needed in order to meet the instructional needs of our students. This policy and academic plan also asks about mentoring and professional development and career advancement. So that's true for both term faculty and P&A instructors. There's a requirement for defining that. So, and TFAPs, what we've done is we put forward 2 recommendations to try to get a better handle on these 2 types of appointments. The issue is that the nature of these appointments being ill-defined has resulted in significant overlap between the job functions of P&A employees with contract faculty. So TFAP set out to come up with a set of recommendations in order to better serve the employees in these roles. First, for both categories is a clear promotional pathway. So there have been incidents where, for example, contract faculty have remained in the assistant professor, assistant contract professor for a very long time before being promoted because of no one keeping track of that. As you know, the pathway to multi-year contracts is often a topic that is discussed with respect to P&A employees. Similar for term faculty, there's an eligibility for multi-year contracts, but it's not widely used. Contract faculty are not currently eligible for, they are eligible for emeritus status, but it requires provost and the Board of Regents approval. Unlike tenure track faculty who only require department head approval for emeritus status. And then this bottom number 4, severance pay and notice, is that that difference that we saw between the non-renewal program eligibility for P&A instructors versus contract faculty. Similarly, for P&A instructors, we made recommendations about a comprehensive job family study in order to understand better what roles teaching specialists and lecturers are playing In that case, we understand that, yes, that greater than 50% of their responsibilities have to be teaching, but we know that many teaching specialists and lecturers have other responsibilities. And the idea with that is to understand better what those responsibilities are and think about doing expanding those job codes into other categories in the same way that the job families have been studied in other for other employees. The pay structure and promotional pathway is establishing market data benchmarks, and that has actually been done. That was done this past summer. There's now market data supporting a minimum rate for teaching specialists and lecturers, and that work is still underway. The promotional pathway, again, is something that I think is very ill-defined compared to other job families. What exactly constitutes a promotion from teaching specialist to senior teaching specialist and from lecturer to senior lecturer is only defined within units and within colleges, and there's often big differences between them. Professional development and leave is also very uneven. There's no central fund in the same way that tenure track faculty are eligible for sabbatical funding. P&A instructors are not eligible for that. There's also a proposal as part of our recommendations that there be a phased retirement option for P&A instructors. I hope I've given you a better picture of the differences between these two categories, and just happy to take questions or have discussion in order to answer your questions. Sure.
Looks like we have one question in the chat, which is what's the name of the Regent policy that the faculty contractual details sections 3.3 and 3.4 are coming from?
That's the Board of Regents policy on faculty tenure.
Any other questions for Catherine while we have her? Oh, there is a question if we will have access to your PowerPoints, Catherine.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share it. I'll share it with Jacqueline and she can attach it to the minutes.
Sounds great. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions so far, so thank you so much for being with us this morning, Catherine. We really appreciate your time.
Great. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we're going to move along into the subcommittee and chair reports. Just a note that the academic appointments with teaching functions policy was submitted to the P&A Senate for information. So you can find that in the meeting docket if you'd like to review. And we're going to move on to our subcommittee reports. Let's go ahead and start with benefits and compensation. Brian and Pamela, are either of you here and ready to go?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Believe Pamela's here too. Yeah, stand by. I have this.
I'm here.
Give me
I
a
just
second.
need to be off camera. Sorry. Thank you.
If you're ready, Pamela, you want to just go ahead?
No, actually, Brian, if you could do it, I'm dealing with kind of a
Oh,
customer
yeah, that's
query.
fine.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I had this up here a second ago and now I've lost it, so stand by. Okay. Yeah. So, oh man, no, that's not it. I apologize. Yeah. Yeah, so just as a quick reminder, we got started like a month late. So our first one, I just realized my camera's not on here too. Right. So Mary Roman Cool came from Total Compensation, and she gave a very nice presentation identifying, sort of like the update on the workforce reinvestment resolution and market refinement process with Paula Merrill. So that was they were good and had some good questions about that, but primarily just the quick takeaways is with that update, the focus was on trying to increase postdoc associate teaching specialist and senior teaching specialist lecturer salary floors. And there was another issue that was raised that was highlighted as far as speaking of salary floors and stuff. There are still some P&A salaries that are below the like $22.25 per hour. So we're trying to the effort is trying to fix that problem and raise those floors as well. So it's also a $1,200 minimum per credit hour payment for teaching specialists and lecturers. And then Paula talked about just where the effort is on ongoing market refinement, and we discussed sort of like I think this is the last group, and it's a really complicated one. So there was some questions about if it's going to take as long as the research group was, because it's complicated, and it sounds like it's not. It sounds like there's a lot that was learned in research, and it should go a little bit smoother now with the administrators and things. So yeah, and so one of the things that was really helpful in the beginning of this year is we used data we collected last year on kind of a survey on what topics people wanted covered. That allowed us to talk with Katie Kolaji and Paula Merrill to queue up the entire season for presentations. So Pamela has put together a similar survey for this year, and that's gone out, and we're just going through all the data so that we should have all the topics lined up for next year then. So that's it.
Great, thanks so much, Brian. We will then move along to communications. So either Angel and or Lydia, if you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hey everyone. The communications subcommittee met for the first time last month, and we kind of solidified our goals for the year. And one of them is just to promote increased communication between our constituents and the unit senator and Senate alternative. So each month when we send out the recap for these P&A Senate meetings, we're going to include some kind of way to promote communication back and forth with senators and the constituents. Last month, we included a Google form that's optional. If you find it useful, we're hoping that you'll utilize it. But it is for you to kind of get an opportunity to capture what are concerns or what are people identifying as issues this year. And then we also met to talk about the November P&A Senate newsletter, and we assigned committee members. And next week, we're going to be putting that together. That's all I have.
Great, thanks so much. We will go on to the outreach report with Kim and Casey.
Hi, we're both here and we decided that I was going to give this update. We had an action-packed meeting on October 24th. We had time for some community building. I'm just going to beg your indulgence. So we asked as an icebreaker, do people prefer pumpkins or apples for fall? Eating, decor, so on. So we got off to a rollicking start. We reviewed our goals for the year and talked about our 3 big projects, which is to work on the nomination process during midterm elections, edit and review the welcome packet, that is move it from where it is to a Google site to make it more accessible. And then we also send out welcome emails for new employees to the idea of governance. And then we also are going to be working on the co-chairs, the annual report. And we also, at the end of our meeting, also came away with some additional new projects based on our previous discussions. So a lot was accomplished, and I think we're really excited about it. And then our next meeting is on the 12th, no, the 10th, no, the 14th, on November 14th.
Thanks, Kim. And then finally, we'll go to PD&E with Joshua and Alex.
Yep, so I will be speaking for Alex and I today. The PD&E committee met on October 20th and we'll be doing it again on November 17th. Coming up, we have the event we heard promoted a bit earlier today with the Office of Conflict Resolution on November 20th. I believe that email already went out. Jacqueline, thank you for sending that out. For that event, we have another event December 9th on promoting integrity and preventing research misconduct. Registration will be formally announced soon, but it should be available to share. And then registration is not open for this one yet, but on February 12th, I guess as a birthday present to me, we're managing Up to Me, creating positive supervisory relationships. And it's not confirmed yet, but it's tentatively thinking that we're doing a March policy pop-up around the P&A leave benefits in light of the recent policy revisions that have come out of Minnesota paid leave that's starting on January 1st, 2026. This would be framed as somewhat of a follow-up of last year's policy pop-up on the subject, which was exciting, or as I think Alex put it, interesting. So I will say, though, that I believe P&A Senate did help contribute to the revisions of the policies informally or formally, that I think we're already in a really good place, I think, with that. And we are going to be kind of working with the presenters a little more closely this time, as well as our subcommittee and potentially benefits and compensation, to make sure that we can come prepared and make sure it's a successful experience for all of our constituents, and that we answer questions and we kind of make sure we give them as much a heads up as possible. But yeah, that's all we have for the moment.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our co-chairs for sharing out. For our chair's report, a lot has been going on since our last meeting, typical at the start of the year. Obviously, our new strategic plan was launched. I saw some of you at the in-person event. Molly and I also had several meetings on behalf of PAC, including with Joseph Alf from the Campus Safety and Security Group, and Ken Horstman, Vice President and Chief HR Officer. Those are kind of regularly scheduled meetings, Ken more so than Joseph, but we wanted to remind you that if you're hearing issues related to safety or security on campus, or if there are specific HR concerns that you want us to elevate, please let me or Molly know so we can bring those to future meetings. Additionally, at our last PAC meeting, we had a presentation on the new Minnesota Pay Leave program. I know a number of you were able to join us for that, so thank you so much for taking the extra time. It was really informative, and Jacqueline sent around an email with the information that was shared. Look for 1016 Minnesota Paid Leave presentation and policy consultation if you're needing to look for that email again. But that includes updates to several policies that need to be slightly tweaked in order to accommodate this new program that's going to be coming into effect as of, I believe, January 1 of 26. One follow-up question I had after our PAC meeting, which I just thought I would share out because we had a lot of great questions. We didn't have time for all the ones we wanted to have, but my question was, does this Minnesota paid leave program effectively replace short-term disability for those of us who invest in that every month? And the answer sounds like it depends. So unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you on that. It depends. So it's something that you should look at for yourself if you think that it might be duplicative of what you might already have. Talk to your HR rep if you have questions. Something to maybe consider during open enrollment. Um, Next, the is it 2 weeks ago already? Wow. The University Senate met and discussed, amongst other things, compact agreement as well as an item which was how to rebuild trust within the Senate. I thought that that was a really good conversation, kind of highlighted concerns that we've heard of, certainly before around appropriate representation of employee groups, relative to our size within the University Senate and, how much space we can take up there relative to, tenured faculty. So we kind of prompted some of those difficult conversations, and I think it's just the start of that conversation, but hopefully one that's going to help us make University Senate more efficient and, bring us together more than we are now. Finally, our P&A Consultative Committee is meeting with President Cunningham on Monday, so November 10th, for a special PAC meeting. Most of that meeting will likely be updates from the president and her office, but we've also posed several questions to her in advance. So around successful shared governance, like what we're trying to do in University Senate, her support for the Work with Flexibility program, and her overall strategy on supporting the institution during a challenging budgetary period. So at our next P&A meeting, I'll be sure to share a brief summary of our conversation with President Cunningham. I'm going to pause quick just to see if there are any questions and or if Molly wanted to add anything that I've left out.
Oh my gosh, I can't find my mouse. The only thing is, we had a meeting this week with the broad Senate leaders. It's called, what do we call CCL? I don't even remember what it stands for. Jacqueline, you could probably remind us in chat. But essentially, it's the consultative committee leaders. So Tony and I and our colleagues that hold the same types of positions in all of the Senates that get together. Thank you, Lori. It's in the chat, consultative committee leaders. And so we had an extended conversation around how that University Senate discussion around rebuilding trust went. And so, yes, Tony is correct that that conversation was just the starting point, I think, for some of this. And I think as a group of committee leaders, we are all committed to moving that conversation forward and not letting it drop, because it's important to working together in the University Senate to make things happen and to represent our constituents. So I think that's the only thing, considering you weren't able to make that meeting, Tony.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Molly. I see there's a comment in chat from Sarah. So if you keep your short-term disability, you could receive more than your salary. Then Minnesota paid leave goes into effect. That's essentially what Ken Horstman told me, is there's a possibility that it could be more than 100% with short-term disability, but with Minnesota paid leave, it would cap at 100%. So a minor
Correct, because
variation.
these are
Yeah.
separate programs. Your
Mhm.
short-term disability is completely independent from what this is. And I know this because I am on the rollout team for this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that was, yeah, I forgot about that entirely. That was the one note that Ken made, that short-term disability is, I think, the one area where you might go above that 100% if you're eligible and you're on leave at a certain time. But so something to consider. Certainly think about emailing your HR folks if you have any other questions. Okay, and then our last item for discussion here are just around remarks for the December Board of Regents meeting. So at our next P&A meeting, I'm actually going to be absent. Molly is going to be leading the December P&A Senate. During that same time, I'm going to be presenting to the Board of Regents, along with the chairs of our other Senate consultative committees. Um, and this topic is just posed as a report of essentially University Senate consultative committees. But we've previously used this report in the couple years we've been doing this now as an opportunity to kind of remind the board who we are as P&A, and to surface anything that we want them to really be aware of about our employee group. And this is maybe even more applicable than it's been in the last couple of years because we have a number of new regents. So folks that we're maybe reaching out to for the first time. So we will do this through providing an updated version of our P&A infographic for this year, and a couple other elements that we've traditionally done. The first being is that we like to provide examples of what P&A employees are doing across the university, the sort of critical work that we're involved in. So my first request to the group is if you know of a P&A employee whose work could or should be highlighted, please reach out to me to let me know. You can reach out directly. Please feel encouraged to volunteer your own work. I know that folks don't like to do that, but I would love to highlight the work that's being done by some of our Senate members as well. The second, or the last half of the report, is typically highlighting critical challenges that we're facing. So last year we made note of the peak initiative and communication challenges that our staff were facing, market refinement and unequal pay, rising inflation related to compensation, and lack of sufficient childcare facilities on our campuses. So all of those are technically just as viable now as they were last year. But my second ask, and one that I'd want to just take a couple minutes to open up for broader conversation right now, is what would you want to have highlighted as sort of the most critical challenges facing P&A employees right now that you would want the board to be aware of? So it's kind of a big question. Again, what we put out there last year is still very much true. Inflation's still in place. There's still market refinement work to be done. But I think that there's shifting tensions now, and I think that there might be some other things that we would want to highlight for the board. So I'll stop talking for a moment and just kind of open it up to folks. You can also feel free to put things in chat if you don't want to volunteer them. And I would say too, feel free to volunteer issues that might, don't feel like you have to name one of the top 3 issues that is facing every employee at the university. Even if it's a critical issue in your area, might be something that we want to consider drawing attention to. If it's something that the board could potentially, make movements on in future. And I'll stop there. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I haven't been around the university in this role for too long, coming up on 4 years, but I keep encountering this, maybe it's an issue, maybe it's not, but this idea that there's some tension between P&A and the board based on kind of an interpretation or a view that P&A is the source of a lot of administrative bloat at the university. I think it'd be good to kind of keep a finger on the pulse for where that is and what the board thinks about that, because longer term, I think it'd be important to try to keep influencing the board to dispel any sort of notion that we're the source of bloat at the university.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's a good point and something I think Kit called attention to directly last year. So I'll keep that in mind as well. Joshua, go ahead.
I don't know that I have the solution or what actually one would say about these, but the 2 things that come to mind just in that specific context are the tensions between, I guess, the tension that I know has been discussed in Senate with the shared governance and administration, and I think that is a board topic of some sort. I don't quite know what they would be doing about it, but I think that's a venue for that. As well as considering kind of with along the administrative bloat question, what the role P&A has in solving it instead of focusing on defending not being the problem, maybe how P&A staff can be part of the solution. Might be another way to reframe it because I imagine the budgetary stuff going on at the university is, they are the entity that addresses that specifically. So I think those are the two things that come to my mind that would be Board of Regents worthy.
Thank you, Joshua. I think that's a really good point. And some to give a little more context, Kit's remarks from last year kind of prompted this is the important work our employees are doing across all of our systems by leading into it and saying this is not administrative bloat as you might understand it to be. This is the critical work that's being done by P&A and reminding them of the scope of that work. So that's really what I'm hoping to capture. If folks can send me individuals to highlight in that as well. Checking the chat to make sure I've not missed anything. I have taken the notes down from the folks that mentioned the compact requests, constituents feeling stuck in their roles, impacts of return to office policies. That's definitely one that's come up a number of times. Anything else that I should make note of? Oh, sorry, Nick, I never see your hand for some reason. Go ahead.
I think because it hides in my background. No worries. This is really echoing Veronica's bit from the chat, but just, yeah, that there's not really codified pathways for promotion for a lot of P&A roles. And I think that ties somewhat into retention of P&A employees too, because of that feeling stuck, like people stagnate and then they move on to jobs either in another unit or outside of the university entirely.
Thank you. I saw a number of thumbs up there, so that definitely resonates with folks. Anyone else? I will say, think on this, think on employees that you'd like to highlight, issues that you're hearing. You can email me separate from the group if you'd like to send that directly, or you can send to Jacqueline or Molly. I'm sure that we'll bring that around. Yeah, I'm hoping that I won't see you all in December, but I'm hoping that I can give an update of what came out of that report to the regions at our first spring meeting. And along with that report, I'm also going to kind of continue to do what my predecessors have, which is to invite the regents to join us for a PAC meeting in future if they're able to join. I know we had one regent who was able to join last year. I think it was Regent Turner, but it's been a little while now. But that was a really good experience to get a regent into a meeting and kind of really show them the employee groups that we represent and the types of issues that we're seeing, because that kind of further separates us out from faculty and from civil service so that they can understand our employee group a little bit better. So hopefully we'll have someone take us up on that this year as well. And with that, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, actually. But it looks like we're at new and old business. I don't believe there's any old business to consider. Is there any new business that anyone wanted to present today? Hearing none. Don't want to keep folks unnecessarily, so I think we can go ahead and call us adjourned for today. Thank you so much. A reminder again, send me thoughts for the Board of Regents remarks. And I look forward to seeing you all in the spring. And Molly will be leading the December P&A meeting, so we'll otherwise see you all then. Thanks so much.